In the course of this module, we've been exploring ways that philanthropic and development organizations could collaborate to tap into future resources that would promote human well-being. We started on the first day with some very broad brainstorming in small groups, collected a lot of fantastic ideas, and then narrowed that down. And now each group is ready to report back with a set of recommendations for action points.
Okay, so the first of our two groups was charged with improving the contribution of philanthropy for sustainable human well-being. And we had kind of three broad areas that we chose to focus on. The first of them we've given this sort of label technical. We felt that one way in which we can help grow philanthropy and direct it to where it can make the biggest impact on human well-being was to design a set of metrics that might be used to get a sense of what well-being was being achieved, and that perhaps that should happen at a country level, perhaps following the OECD model, which came out of the first module here, but also at the organizational level, so that the philanthropic actors can identify those organizations where their giving is going to make a genuine difference to human well-being. Once we have that, then that set of metrics can feed into improving the level of accountability and transparency that we have right now. And we had a debate around the fact that if we're going to do that, that the data has to be accessible to those philanthropic actors, those folks that are going to pump that resource into communities. And to do that, well, maybe we need to come up with some new approaches for doing that. But equally, we can build very much on the existing channels that are already available, where donors can get information about what work organizations are doing. So working very much in partnership. And because it's about accountability and transparency, it's not enough to just generate the metrics, but we have to make sure that they're translated into a language which people can understand and will actually make a difference somewhere at the end of the day. We've got all of that wonderful metric out there, but there's no point in generating those figures if nobody knows what the heck it means. So parallel to that, there needs to be some way of educating the philanthropic actors about what good performance, average performance, and terrible performance looks like, so that you can get a sense of where the priorities might be.
We focused on impact investing. It's a very new initiative. It's around 3 years old, and we sort of explored the areas. How can we actually increase the capital that comes from impact investors to improve well-being, and how can we expand this definition of impact to actually include well-being? So we started to think about the what and the how we go about it, and basically there was a question around that we can improve the relevance of the actual data that is available on well-being, gathered from development agencies, from philanthropists, from other players, to increase the efficiency, accountability, and the impact. A clear action is to perhaps refine indices of well-being that exist out there, to frame it in the right language for investors, to include metrics for intangibles and explore how they can be integrated into these indices, and vitally important, to seek creative ways to actually get the input from the community, so from the beneficiary into the impact that you want to create. The second action point is that we mobilize the capacity to gather data and share data and knowledge. So let's look at all the platforms that are out there. We found that there are a lot of data sets which are in silos, which are currently not being shared. So the government actually creates a whole set of data, development agencies, national governments, academia, communities, business, donors. There are lots of data sets out there. It's not coordinated. And we think that with the IT and technology, there might be some very creative ways to tap into those data sets, which will then inform the impact investor whether this actually contributes to well-being.
I'm going to talk about our group, which was supposed to be about how to increase public revenue for development and well-being and rapidly change direction. We basically came up with, at the end of all this process, one big idea and then a couple of small ones, and they're all overlapping and confused. So here we go. So the big idea, we started off thinking about natural resources. So there's this, record high prices for minerals, for oil and gas, for land, lots of possibilities for both good and ill for developing countries. So in order to make those natural resource revenues work for development, work for well-being, work for poverty reduction, you need to think about things like the transparency issues. So do you know how much money is being paid to the government? Do you know which companies are paying what? And then you can start to ask what's happened to the money. So there's that basic accountability question. So all this money is going to the government. Where's it been spent? the right to information is kind of underpins all this. You have to get the right to information either in law or certainly in practice as a way to actually begin to have this public conversation about the use of natural resource revenues. We just felt there was a case for more cross-sector collaboration on tracking different kinds of experiment, different kinds of innovation, evaluating them, collecting the good examples together and the learning from those, and then publicizing them to death.
We talked about community voice and action as a resource to be unleashed in order to achieve the outcomes. And I guess the first thing it's worth noting is that we defined community fairly loosely. So it can be geographical, it can be an interest group, it can be across geographies and in different ways. We then looked at a range of enablers and constraints. So access to information and feedback loops, we thought this was a real powerful enabler. Shared values, that isn't valves. Technology and technologies, an interesting debate throughout whether it's enabling or actually there are very specific things that technology can do to enable beyond and actually be there. So what can philanthropy and development contribute to unleashing the resource of community voice and action? We thought that really, and this has resonated across the board, promoting access to and sharing of information within and across communities and with others in the system. That this is extremely important, whether you frame it as a right issue or whether you frame it as enabling information that enables people to just realize what they're capable of doing themselves.
The last thing that we said we really have to engage in, and it came out of a discussion around politics and power and how we as a sector have historically shied away from it. We consider ourselves apolitical. We don't like to talk about power. We like to talk about empowering people, but not about what that actually means for others. And we certainly shy away from things like lobbying because that's considered to be just a dirty word and we don't want to engage in it. And our strong recommendation was, and I think the words of someone I'm not allowed to attribute, were we just need to get over ourselves and engage. The thing we could do very, very concretely was increasingly our role is going to be creating that evidence base, and that was mentioned in a number of different ways, and it seems to be an emergent theme, that we create the evidence in ways that are digestible and sound bites that actually people listen to and we can push. And that's our communication strategy for just being more effective at advocacy for those issues.
I'd like to just wrap up. I've made the point before that there have been a lot of commonalities in the first two sections of this summit. How we most effectively produce evidence and use it not just to sharpen our program and improve our outcomes, but really as part of our overall strategy, ways to connect with communities, and ways to improve our communications.